All right, you can see I've got my Porsche Carrera 80s aviator sunglasses on, and that means we can only be talking about one man, the nature boy Ric Flair. Woo! So kicking things off, we have this edition of Wrestling Superstars from spring of 1981. You can see Rick is right there with the big stars of that era. Bruno Sammartino, WWF champion Bob Backlund, NWA world champion Harley Race, who Rick would win his second title from, more on that later, and of course Mil Mascaras. We then move on to this edition of The Wrestler, dated February 1982. Rick is in his first reign as NWA world champion, and this cover features Rick and his then #1 challenger, a former NWA world champion himself, Wildfire Tommy Rich. Moving right along, we have another edition of The Wrestler, this one cover dated August 1983, featuring Rick and Greg the Hammer Valentine. Moving along to November of 1983, Thanksgiving night, Rick goes up against Harley Race in a steel cage, where he wins his second NWA World Heavyweight Championship. This is considered the passing of the torch from Harley to Rick. That night, Rick wore one of his famous robes, and as you can see, I have both a feather and a sequin from that robe. Commemorating that victory, we have the April 1984 edition of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. This is a very famous cover, and somewhere, I haven't been able to find it, there's a picture of Shawn Michaels in the mirror, basically emulating this cover of Flair. We're keeping the magazines going. This time it's Inside Wrestling, July of 1984. The cover story is a Night of Champion at the Meadowlands. And I can tell you, being from New Jersey, man, I miss that place. I am not a fan of the Prudential Center. Sorry, not sorry. Flair continues to be a popular choice for the aftermags. In 1984, we've got The Wrestler with an October 1984 cover date. Flair is now in his third title reign, having defeated Kerry Von Erich earlier in the year. Here he's featured with frequent challenger Ron Garvin. They would exchange the title a few years later, but we're not there yet. Moving away from the magazines for a little bit, we're into 1985, where Rick gets his first ever action figure from the legendary All-Star Wrestlers line by the AWA, put out by Remco. As the packaging says, it's NWA Champion versus AWA Challenger. Funny, there was a set with Rick Martel, and he had a belt, but no belt for Rick here. Still, nice piece of history. Also in 1985, the AWA and NWA would join forces to create Pro Wrestling USA. This is a program from that year featuring Rick once again in that famous blue robe and Magnum TA. Hey, it's Rick on another magazine cover. Can you believe it? This one is cover dated August 1985, Sports Review Wrestling, and it is signed by Rick and Nikita Koloff. Going into 1986, the NWA and the AWA are still working together. They present Battlestar 86 at the Meadowlands Arena. Did I mention I missed that place? It's Flair versus Magnum TA on top. They have both signed this along with many other people on the card. Staying in 1986, Rick travels to Texas. He was in fact the last traveling world champion to defend his title against Wink Wink Nudge Nudge, the Von Erich cousin, Lance Von Erich, as shown in this March 1986 edition of The Wrestler. But it's still, again, a nice piece of history. And let me take a minute to say, if you like signed magazines, go check out my friends at Wrestler Weekly. They have more signed magazines than you could possibly imagine. Ric goes into 1987 as the world champion. He would lose the belt in September of that year to the man with the hands of stone, Ron Garvin. That aired on an episode of Worldwide Wrestling. This leads to a rematch at Starrcade 87 in a steel cage. Ric comes out on top, becoming a 5-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Next up, we have this Pro Wrestling Illustrated pinup. Yes, this is my original copy. As you can see, it's well worn. I got this done at a convention in the 90s. The pinup itself is from the November 1989 issue. And I just love it with the robe and the big gold belt. This is one of my favorite collectibles that I have overall. Also in 1988, Ric Flair debuts his famous pink robe. I've got 2 pieces that were released with the WWE video game, as well as an original feather from the robe, absolutely beautiful, from a former owner of that robe. Ric completes 1988 as champion, but January of 1989 sees an old rival return to the NWA in the form of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. They have a classic trilogy of matches that year. The first one being February 20th, 1989, Chi-Town Rumble. Ricky Steamboat defeats Flair for the NWA World title. Concluding Ric's trilogy of matches with Steamboat, where he regained the title at Wrestle War 89 in May. He is attacked by another absolute legend, Terry Funk. Flair now finds himself in the unfamiliar role as fan favorite, and he and Funk begin a brutal feud. Ric would continue his feud with Terry, culminating at the 1989 Clash of Champions in November, the New York Knockout. Ric defeats Terry Funk in an I Quit match, as shown on this March 1990 edition of The Wrestler. We head into the 90s. Ric is champion, and he finally gets another action figure. This time, it's in the first series of WCW Galoob figures. Also of note is this is the last year WCW operates under the NWA banner, as the first cards do say featuring the superstars of the NWA, which in the next set of cards would be changed to the superstars of WCW. You've heard of the little Nate? Well, here's the big Nate. He's 14 inches tall, he's ready to brawl, and he was put out by Galoob in 1991. He was one of only 4 figures in this set, which also featured Sting, Lex Luger, and Sid Vicious. We go from the big Nate to the littlest Nate. What is this, you might ask? Looks very similar to the Galoob. This was actually attached to a keychain that was put out by Hope Industries in 1991. 1991, Ric Flair is not having a great time in World Championship Wrestling, and he is fired. Yes, the greatest wrestler of all time is fired by WCW President Jim Herd, but Jim Herd doesn't realize that going back to the NWA days, the champion had to put a deposit on the belt, which was not returned to Ric, so he brings the big gold to the World Wrestling Federation. Ric not only lands on his feet in the WWF, he wins the championship at the 1992 Royal Rumble, widely regarded as the greatest Royal Rumble of all time, and he's immortalized with this Hasbro figure in 1993. We jump to 1995. Flair is returned to WCW. The toy license is now with the original San Francisco toy makers. Flair's released multiple times, including Series 1 with the purple trunks and Series 2 with the green trunks. Not a huge fan of this series, but I do like these figures. And of course, I'm a big Flair fan, so I picked up both of these. 1998, we get 2 more releases from the original San Francisco toy makers. The larger one has forearm smash action. And there you can see the button in the back for the forearm smash action. 1999, the license moves over to Toy Biz. They release a cool 4-pack of the Four Horsemen, featuring Rick and the only figure to my knowledge of the late Steve Mongo McMichael. Got a nice basic robe here, but it does have Nature Boy on the back. Getting into the home stretch, we jump ahead to 2008, where Rick gets a well-deserved induction into the WWE Hall of Fame, and you can see here a replica statue and Hall of Fame ring. Moving along to 2019, you've got this Foco bobblehead featuring the classic pink robe, seen many a time, including Ric Flair's world title victory over Vader at Starrcade 93. And you've got the WWE domes, which are basically distributed in unmarked plastic bags, and you got what you got. And luckily, one of the ones I got was 𝐬𝐻. Last 2 pieces. This is a WWE Superstars released by Mattel. You can see it's a throwback to that first AWA figure. Not sure if I'm going to get it signed, but I've chose not to open it at this time. Closing it out, we have this Ric Flair AEW figure by Jazzwares. Even though it's a modern release, this robe can actually be seen in a world-class match against Terry Gordy from January of 1985. And before I go, let me shout out my friend Josh, JWLJN on here. He reviewed this figure and I saw this and I said, yeah, I'm going to pick this up. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please subscribe. I upload cool pro wrestling collectibles every week. And until then, keep styling and profiling and check out my other videos.